In news that will shock absolutely no one that's been following issues around censorship all around the world, thanks to work done by Big Brother Watch in the UK via a Freedom of Information request and The Telegraph for its reporting, it can be now revealed that the UK government was also involved in a secret censorship program of its citizens through the Counter Disinformation Unit to monitor people for having anti-lockdown sentiment, for discussing vaccine passports, for discussing lockdowns. You get the idea. Now, the reason I say also is because recently we found out in Australia, the Home Affairs Ministry was involved in a very similar thing through the Social Cohesion Division, right? All these funny, strange names they use for these units. In America, we've seen the censorship industrial complex being exposed by things like the Twitter files and, of course, other freedom of information requests, which showed that even though there wasn't a particular department or program set up, that the actual agencies that already existed in America and the White House itself was coordinating with these social media companies who were more than happy to give them user data and help them monitor and censor people based on whatever the government was telling them to do. Okay, so this was happening broadly across Australia, the UK, and United States of America. But we also know, I'm going to keep saying also, but we also know that in Canada, similar things happen, and also in New Zealand via the Disinformation Project also, although they deny links to the government. So in these countries who all have links via the Five Eyes program in terms of intelligence sharing, they are also very much using similar tools to monitor their own citizens for just having discussions online, right? Their free speech is being curtailed online and they are being censored by these secret government programs, particularly during the time of this, emergency that they used to justify a lot of the actions that they took. And it's very important that these things are continuing to be exposed through these freedom of information requests and through the work of some of these newspapers that are doing this, because otherwise we wouldn't hear about it. The government was not freely telling us, right? All of this was done in secret, which should be a scandal in and of itself, but it's not, because the mainstream media, at least from what we can tell, were also aware of these things happening, and sometimes they were privy to the discussions, as we'll find out as we're reading this article. So let me just get to this article. We'll have a little bit of a read of it and try to understand exactly what's happened here. So I will actually link to this article as well, and they'll be available via a archived link in the description of this video. Exclusive. Ministers had chilling secret unit to curb lockdown dissent. Critics of COVID restrictions targeted by counter disinformation team at the heart of the government. A secretive government unit worked with social media companies in an attempt to curtail discussion of controversial lockdown policies during the pandemic, The Telegraph can reveal. The Counter Disinformation Unit, CDU, was set up by ministers to tackle supposed domestic threats and was used to target those critical of lockdown and questioning the mass vaccination of children. The critics had posts removed from social media. There is a growing suspicion that social media firms use technology to stop posts from being promoted, circulated, or widely shared after being flagged by the CDU or its counterpart in the Cabinet Office. Documents revealed under the Freedom of Information and Data Protections request showed that the activities of prominent critics of the government's COVID policies were secretly monitored. An artificial intelligence firm, AI, was used by the government to scour social media sites the company flagged discussions opposing vaccine passports. Many of the issues being raised were valid at the time and have since been proven to be well-founded. So a few things just there. The revelation that these third-party companies who were contracted out were using AI, artificial intelligence, to monitor citizens on behalf of the government, right? They were scouring up all this publicly available data. Public posts, news posts, articles, social media posts, and then they were feeding it through these artificial intelligence algorithms or whatever they were using, the software, and then reporting back to the government on potential posts or users that they should be monitoring. And they themselves also had the capability to interact directly with companies like Facebook, for instance, through other programs that they had to actually flag posts themselves. So the government's actually contracting out the censorship of its citizens to private companies who are then using AI to do this. Now, on the face of it, using AI, I'll just pull up this other article as well. The firm is actually called Logically, if anyone wants to look into this. I'll also put the link to this article as well, which was just put out yesterday. So to use AI to just gather data and analyze it for analytical purposes or to get an understanding of what the community is talking about, there might be a case to be made for that and the government engaging in such activities. It kind of makes sense on the surface. What the issue is, though, is that these companies are then using that technology, right, to target specific people sometimes, or to give the government specific user data in terms of these are the people that are talking about this particular topic this many times in this particular fashion and in this sentiment, and then they're using that to give that to the government and saying, look, this person is saying X and Y about lockdowns. Okay, then the government then is putting that person potentially on a list. Now, we don't know exactly if this is how it happened, but we do know that particular individuals were monitored, including professors and doctors who were just sharing their personal expert medical opinions at times, including also even activists sometimes were being monitored in this fashion. So we have this issue where artificial intelligence is being used to ascertain people's sentiment, and then the government is then creating lists. That's where the problem is. It's not the fact that these companies are doing analytical work on user sentiment. No, it's the fact is that these are then being used to create lists of people to monitor. And that's the difference between a free country, a democracy, a liberal Western democracy, and CCP in China. Okay, that's the difference. And they've blurred those lines. And this should be a massive scandal, but it's not. Anyway, let's keep reading these articles. Many of the issues being the BBC also took part. I mean, I'm not surprised, in the secretive meetings of Government Policy Forum to address the so-called disinformation. Yes, because the BBC, who are experts in disinformation and misinformation, also took part in the forums. And happens in Australia, like the ABC here, very heavily involved in fact-checking because, they never get anything wrong. They're heavily involved in these fact-checking things, especially during the time of COVID. They worked very closely with a university called RMIT here, who engage in this type of fact-checking. And it's all very interrelated to the government and their censorship programs as well. Of course, we haven't been able to show exact direct links, but all the ingredients that we're seeing here of things happening in the UK also exist in Australia, and I'm sure in the US, Canada, and New Zealand as well. Let's keep reading. On Friday, MPs and freedom of speech campaigners condemned the disclosure as truly chilling and a tool for censoring British citizens, akin to those of the CCP. Much of the government's wider disinformation is shrouded in national security reasons. Large parts of the official documents are redacted. Yeah, I mean, standard stuff for governments. When they give these documents, almost all of it, besides the title, is redacted. So they did give the document, they did release the document, but here it's just a big black boxes redacted. Critics of lockdown had posts removed from social media. There is growing suspicion. I'm just reading the same thing. Sorry. Let me just go down. Oh. It can now be revealed that activities of Professor Carl Hennigan, the Oxford epidemiologist, who also advised Boris Johnson, and Dr. Alexander de Figueiredo, I've just butchered those names, a research fellow at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, were monitored by government disinformation units. Molly Kingsley, who set up the campaign to keep schools open during the pandemic, also had her social activity monitored. As well as CDU, the government operated a rapid response unit, RRU, in the Cabinet Office that hunted online for content and considered disinformation. The CDU, which is still operating, was embedded in the Department of Culture, Media and Sports. The department has trusted flagger status on social media companies, including Facebook and Twitter, which means that requests for content to be removed are fast-tracked for consideration. In some cases, individuals whose social media posts were recorded by the units have subsequently faced sanctions by Twitter and Facebook. Ministers denied asking for posts by Professor Hennigan and Dr. DeFigurio or Miss Kingsley to be removed. The government has said that the CDU is focused on helping the government understand online disinformation narratives and understand attempts to artificially manipulate the information environment. Bullshit. Nonsense. Who was artificially manipulating the information environment? It was the government. If we look at why they got this AI company involved, some of the things that this AI company was doing, right, wasn't necessarily around finding mis or disinformation. They were actually finding valid information that might lead to the narrative being shifted, so sentiment changing. So that's why sometimes we're actually monitoring doctors and professors who were sharing valid information, and they were alerting the government to this fact that, look, these people are talking about this thing, which might actually counter the narrative of the government. So the government is not also interested in monitoring dis or misinformation. They are also interested in figuring out how they can control the narrative by countering opposing narratives, right? A lot of this is about that. So, we have to understand that this is information warfare that's being leveled against the public by the government by using secret programs and artificial intelligence. Like, they've taken it up a notch. If you're enjoying using ChatGTP and all these AI apps and you're thinking, wow, this is so amazing, just think about the awesome power at the disposal of the government, particularly when done in secret, that they're using against the public. We'll keep reading. The government also ran a counter disinformation policy which brought together civil servants from the and technology giants, including Facebook and Google, as well as the BBC, to discuss how to limit the spread of what was considered COVID-19 disinformation. The forum and 2 units were not only where the government revealed. I'm going to skip some of this. The RRU has admitted in an FOI obtained by Big Brother Watch and passed to the Telegraph that it made requests for social media posts to be taken down. As a part of its work, the Cabinet Office also passed the CDU media monitoring reports. Documents reveal that the material flagged by the CDU included articles published by the Telegraph. So again, they're flagging newspaper articles, not just social media posts. They're targeting journalists and newspaper articles in terms of the system flagging this as potential news that's being shared widely. So the government should look at this. Now, again, on the surface, that seems okay. But then if the government's using that information to switch the narrative and control the narrative and put out counter messaging, okay, not because the messaging that's being shared by these newspapers are incorrect or because the messaging shared by these experts is wrong or incorrect, but they're like, how do we counter this? Who do we censor? Right? Which areas do we target? Right? This is why they're using AI. It's information warfare. One of these was a piece by Miss Kingsley, published in February 2022, arguing that it was indefensible that children's lives were still not back to normal when the rest of society was. She urged ministers to make clear statement that children's extracurricular activities should not be subject to additional curbs. Why is the government monitoring people talking about, the impact this is having on children? As in monitoring individual users having these views. One of Miss Kingsley's tweets from December 2020, in which she said it would be unforgivable to close schools, was also passed to the CDU. Sounds ridiculous. Anyway, I'm going to link to this article. You can have a read of it. It goes into a bit more detail. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you get a little bit of the idea of what's been happening here. And I think, again, I just want to reiterate the issue here is the fact that these tools are being used to suppress free speech and debate that is valid debate, right? Valid discussions that we should be having around government policy. And to think that they are now stepping it up a level using these AI companies, using these secretive methods, and potentially even working with each other, with their international counterparts. Like, this is a legitimate thing that they're doing. If we go to what's happening in Australia, for instance, if you look at Australia's disinformation and misinformation project, they're very open about the fact that they will work with international partnerships with governments, industry, and civil society to enhance resilience. So, I mean, would not be surprised if all of this is coordinated and done in participation with these countries' knowledge of the intelligence agencies. And if some of this software that they're using, particularly around AI and so on, are not being shared amongst each other, and massive databases of users and the posts that they're sharing are being kept and analyzed to figure out who people are, what they're saying, how it could be particularly used by the government to shift a narrative, or how it could be used to suppress a particular topic from being discussed anywhere in the world. And it's very scary because we're seeing how easy it is for us to just access something like ChatGTP and plug into all the information that's available there on the internet and access that when it helps us. But think about governments scouring the internet for all the data on its citizens, right? Private data sometimes, even though it's in the public sphere, private in the sense of people's private communications in public. I know it sounds strange, but these are people's ideas, but then this is then being siphoned off into these agencies and these AI programs, which is potentially then being shared amongst each other. You get the drift. I'm going on a little bit now, but have a read of these articles, consider some of the things that I've said, and really consider the ramifications and understand why it's important that we keep an eye on this and why this is such a scandal. And if you do get the opportunity to raise this with a member of government or just to family and friends, to let them know just how deep this monitoring of our free speech is now going online, I think it's very important. But look, guys, if you're enjoying my videos, you can follow me on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, and Odyssey. Also on Rumble at The Real Rukshan. Thanks, guys, and see you next time.